Stan Hansen does a little interview. Out he comes. Stan Hansen, one of the things you need to know about him, which always makes it funny, is he's got such bad eyesight that he is registered blind, even at this stage. And what's funny about that is when you start watching his eyes, you're aware that sometimes he catches the camera, but quite often he's a little bit off.
Right.
And what that does is it gives him an element of him seeming genuinely demented, mad, like he's about to attack the person behind you.
Yeah.
I love it. I can't get enough of him. He explains how a bull rope match works. They're going to be having a bull rope match with Lex Luger for Hansen's US belt a bit later on. And I love Hansen more than probably any other wrestler. I mean, Dusty Rhodes and your Terry Funk and everything. I think if you said you can only watch the matches of one pro wrestler for the rest of your life, the whole career, I may pick Stan Hansen. He spans so many exciting things, and his quality of matches, basically from 1976 to the mid-90s, was always 5-star. He's just a remarkable man.
And we've got Roman Reigns on line 2. He's very upset with you, Mark.
Nobody controls me. I'm the one that goes all over the world, and I beat people up. I'm not in a big ego rush. I'm not after all the bright lights and the little women. I got a big fat wife and 9 kids at home, and I gotta feed them. And anybody that takes money out of my pocket, Larry Zbyszko, I'm gonna get him. Get out of here.
Here is Stan Hansen. Why is Hansen so great? He is considered the most successful and popular gaijin in Japanese professional wrestling history. And he became better known and more revered in Japan than in his native America. Vice did a little profile of him, and there's a beautiful way they explain what he's like. They said Hansen would just appear like a tornado, beat the hell out of your favourite babyface, and then disappear for a few months or a year to do his violent business somewhere else. A barrel-chested force of nature, the type of wrestler who was grappling with his own wild restlessness as much as he was with other men. He was, in a word, scary, in a way a lot of wrestlers weren't, and this was made doubly so by his restlessness. His unfamiliarity meant he was always fresh whenever he kicked in the door of whatever territory you were stuck watching, whether that was WWF, NWA, or AWA. Stan Hansen himself said, I worked a very physical and aggressive style. There's no getting round it. Part of the reason he had this very aggressive, stiff style was because of his eyesight. And because he was so blind, he basically had to connect with people so that he knew he hadn't just sort of missed them by 12 inches.
Yeah.
He was very aware that because of his poor sight, he was worried that he'd expose the business.
Yeah, so whiffing.
Exactly, whiffing past people. So given the choice between going soft and betraying the business or going hard and hurting people, he very much went for the second choice.
I watched a little interview with him about talking about when he used to wrestle in Japan and how, I can't remember whose company, I think Inoki's company used to travel in separate buses, the heels and the baby faces. But then I think the other big company, All Japan, they're just all in one bus because it's just saving money. There's so much to be kind of learned, certainly from my perspective, about like how gaijin wrestlers kind of just live their lives.
You'll love it.
I
mean, it's a funny thing about how it's not for everyone. And I think, with Stan Hansen, what you see with the gaijin who have long careers in Japan is they've got their heads screwed on straight. They aren't profligate. They don't drink. They don't take drugs. They're just professionals and they're doing a job. And Stan Hansen is absolutely the epitome of that. Absolutely the epitome. He starts as a college footballer in 1973. By 1976, he's main eventing in the WWF against Bruno Sammartino, the champion. Right. So an incredible quick curve. While he was doing a power slam on the champion Bruno Sammartino during a match, they misjudged the slam, the angle, and Bruno Sammartino's neck was broken. The WWF, obviously, they didn't sort of mention it was a fuck-up, and they said Bruno had his neck broken by Stan's infamous Lariat, which was his clothesline. And that one single thing made Stan Hansen a huge superstar for the rest of his life.
Over this time, Hansen on his feet, adjusting that elbow, slams him down to the canvas.
I am the man who broke your neck, Bruno. Every morning you got to get up, brother, and look in the mirror and think that Texan did it and got away with it.
It was turned into a very big feud, so when Sammartino returned, they had a number of matches. The fans hated Stan Hansen so much. He was continuously having to hide on the floors of taxi cabs to get out of the arena. Right. He was once on the subway. He was attacked by a very elderly man who just saw him and just launched at him. But he was also told by Sammartino that Sammartino had said that a load of mafia people, because Sammartino had the Italian-American heritage, Sammartino had been approached by a local mafia chapter who had said, do you want us to to take care of this Stan Hansen guy. And Bruno said, no, it's all right. Do you know what? I'm going to get him. I'm going to get my honour back. And they were like, well, okay, but just if you say the word...
Any help, yeah.
If you say the word, we'll kill Stan Hansen, is what they're saying there. Their big grudge match, it brought 32,000 fans to Shea Stadium on the undercard of a match between Muhammad Ali and Antonio Inoki. So as soon as basically this feud with Sammartino was over, Hansen began going to Japan, where he would really have this career that just made him huge. He had that legitimate thing, the whole idea that you're the man who broke Bruno Sammartino's neck was a really good sell for them. And so he goes to Japan in 1977. They have a working relationship with the WWF at the time, and he never comes back. He had a great career in New Japan, huge sort of tag team tournaments they'd do where he'd team up with Bruiser Brody, and they became a really, really important team. They basically were the main event from the moment they touched down. And Hansen talks about a thing which is fascinating about the way wrestling works. He said, while it wasn't outright said between us, we probably were competing a little against each other to see who could be the best in the ring. That level of competition being so high, it just improves Hansen year after year after year. In 1981, he jumps from New Japan, where he's been feuding with Antonio Inoki right at the top of the card, to join Giant Baba's All Japan Pro Wrestling, which is the big rival. And Hansen became the only man to pin the two legends of Japanese wrestling, Inoki and Giant Baba. The only person, no other Japanese person, I believe, has done it. Right. So you can see what a big deal it is. Yeah. Hansen also, because he's working in Japan, he has a longer career than anybody else. And he's talked about this. He's talked about how little he wanted to be working in the US. He said guys there were working 330 days out of the year. They'd get exhausted, they'd fall out and go off the deep end. And I don't blame them. But I decided early on I'd give up some money rather than do that. I went through a divorce and my kids would stay with me when I wasn't in Japan. I was like Mr. Mum. I wasn't a wrestler to them, and that's why I had the best job in wrestling, because I could live a completely different life. In the 80s, he was a big star. They gave him the AWA championship, but he began debating about the method by which he'd lose it, and so they would end up sort of falling out, and he had to return the belt to them, which he had returned after running it over a load of times in his cars. And basically, Hansen just keeps going, so he's as good in the early 90s as he was in the early 70s, you know, and I think it's because he didn't wear his body out. You know, he's just a remarkable guy, and everyone talks about him just being a complete professional, although also incredibly tough. There is a match I was watching, which is the famous one where he knocks out Vader's eye, they keep going. It's just astonishing.
Good Lord.
How he ends up in WCW is he's got an old friendship with Ole Anderson, who is the booker, and Ole Anderson says, will you come in for a few matches? And Hansen says, yes, sure, as long as I don't have to be there all the time, I'm more than happy to. He ends up leaving in 1991 because Dusty Rhodes says to him, we want to make you into a sort of comedy character, a comedy cowboy. And Hansen is just like, well, yeah, that would be a perfect way of ruining my Japanese career, which I actually care about. And so he just fucked off. That restlessness. Big restless
the
cowboy.
When somebody, you know, gives you an absolute curveball you didn't want, and you're just like, well, I'm not doing that. Imagine having respect for yourself.
He is still alive, Hansen, still in great health. Yeah. Every time you see him talk, he just looks like the coziest granddad you could ever see. And you would just be incapable of understanding the levels of violence. A, that he's lived through, and B, I always think with Stan Hansen, it must be a unique thing to not really be able to see what's going on. And he's just felt his way in every match.
Yeah, it's kind of sort of feeling your way through breaking people's eyes and stuff.
You say to him, you wrestled Andre the Giant, and there was an Andre the Giant match from about 81, 82, which is the best match I've ever seen Andre have. It's astonishing. And that thing of just going, you couldn't really see what was happening, but you must have a sort of like feel memory of it. Oh, I remember that one, hand right up here. Yeah. You know, just a weird way of doing it.
Oh, he was heavy. Wasn't he heavy?
He's one of the few people who was allowed to be slammed by Andre, very sweetly.
Lex Luger in just a few seconds, you're gonna have to deal with me once and for all. And this represents little old Lexi. You make me sick.
So this match they have, it's uniquely because of the way Stan Hansen is not going to take a pinfall. And what they've done at the previous pay-per-view Halloween Havoc, they have given Stan Hansen the US belt. He's beaten Lex Luger. And it's to get him over and legitimise him, make him a big star to an American audience who probably, if they've heard of him, they still don't know what he's like. They've never seen him perform. And so the problem is now they put the belt on him, they have to get it off him, and Stan Hansen doesn't have any interest in being pinned. Yeah. It will affect him back at home. What will the Japanese think when they hear back at home that he's lost to Lex Luger? So he's not going to do that. So what they come up with is the compromise ideas of saying, well, let's do you in a bullrope match. That way you don't have to take a pinfall. And a bullrope match, you get tied together. Normally there's a bell in the middle that people use as a weapon. Apparently they lost it.
Right.
They didn't know it was there, so they're just tied together here. But in a bullrope match, you have to touch each consecutive turnbuckle without being interrupted. Now, these matches, they're not actually usually very good. And part of that is because until you've got probably 3 turnbuckles touched, people aren't like,
Don't really
the match
care.
could end.
Yes, yeah.
So you're always building up to something that you have to go through that bit before people go, we might see the end here.
It's like baseball, isn't it? Like
what you aren't going to see is go, oh, it's going to end quickly. And it's just, so they can be very, very boring. Also, the fixation of the rope. You aren't doing great big moves because you're so obsessed with going, how can we use the rope? And it's just like, well, what is this? So there's some good bits. I mean, Hansen hangs Luger over the top rope with it's a classic sort of 70s Texas wrestling spot, that. Hansen also, you see bits in this match where you go, that's why he's better than everybody else. There's a bit where Luger just whips him into the turnbuckles, and Hansen begins picking up speed as he's running, so that when he hits the turnbuckles, he really hits them. He just does it so brilliantly. You barely notice it, but you go, gosh, everything he does, he adds a little extra, which is just unique. We get this match, and the crowd aren't into it until Lex Luger hits the 3rd buckle. And then they go,
oh my God, something might happen now.
And by the time Luger hits the 4th, the place fucking explodes. I had no idea they were so quietly watching and getting into it.
It kicks Hansen back down. That's the 3rd one. He's going to do one more. One more time. He's feet away, only feet away.
But it's the longest feat of his life.
The thing that happens, of course, is that Luger is he's pushed by Hansen into the referee. So the referee, has he noticed him hit the 4th one? And then Hansen just goes mentally, pulls his boot off, starts smacking him. Just being in your sock. There's something about that, which again is Hansen going a little bit further than everyone else. He's got quite a dainty foot.
Yeah.
And just having that thing of walking around in a sock because you've gone further than everybody else has. You didn't have to do that. You made yourself look a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you're happy to do it.
But it plays into the character that I'm so angry, I do not mind debasing myself.
Yeah, I'm a desperate man in all situations.
I will take my boot off too.
There is nothing I won't do. I know it's just taking a shoe off. It's not like he cuts his own hand off or something, but it's a spot that you don't see very often. What they then have is Hansen goes round and hits all 4, and they ring the bell. They give him the belt, but then the original referee says, no, Luger did it first, and they give him the belt back. And even then I sort of go, is that Hansen going, not only am I not going to lose, I need it so that if anyone asks to see the tape, I can show them that I won and I can cut the tape there before they give the belt back. I mean, it is sort of amazing.
Winner and still United States Heavyweight Champion, Stan the Lariat Hansen.
Wait a minute!
The one!
Referee Randy Anderson saw it all! Luger with a clothesline!
Look, guys, we've got the Pat O'Connor Tag Team Tournament.
Yes,
and,
baby.
And let me just tell you, I mean, you think of car crashes. If I said I've got to put on a pay-per-view of wrestling
in an hour,
and I came back and I watched that afterwards, I would say to myself, I've really let myself down there. I've really let myself down. Please welcome Troy Montour. Shocking stuff.
So weird.
Just in a few seconds, I'm bringing that bell out there, and I'm going to take that title, and I'm going to take it all the way back to Texas. Youth!